مفترض الدولة ما يحاول يساند أي برنامج، بس أننا موافقين ده هو خرج لنا الدولة حتى حاليا أنا ما عارفين اتجاه ذات عشان أنا نمشي وين. نسبة التعليم ذاته ما في الدولة، وإذا الناس لسه في الجهوية. أنا داير أمشي اشتري بقر، لما أنا أقول لصاحب البقر أنا داير أحاول أقرأ ده قروشك ده في تلفونك، هو ما شاف القروش، هو حاله هو بيصدق ما بيصدق. أنا داير أمشي اشتري فول ولا سمسم ولا ذرة كويس ولا شريف ولا بافرة، حاله هو بيصدق بالكلام ده، هو ما بيصدق.
Sounds of the Week on iRadio, your eye on South Sudan.
Live from Juba, on air and online.
This is iRadio News.
Hello, good afternoon. This is iRadio News. First, here are the headlines. The court session today has been adjourned to Friday following a request by the prosecution citing the fatigue of the lead investigator after presenting witness statements in the Nasir incident against suspended First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and senior SPLM-IO officials. President Salva Kiir this morning convened a high-level consultative meeting with leaders of the economic cluster to discuss the country's economic challenges and preparations for the forthcoming International Monetary Fund and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. And the Transitional National Legislative Assembly has passed a motion calling for the development of a national cemetery management policy in South Sudan. This is stories and more coming to you in this news bulletin with me, Lasuba Memo. And now the news in detail. The special court, or rather the court session today, has been adjourned to Friday following a request by the prosecution citing the fatigue of the lead investigator after presenting witness statements in the Nasir incident case against suspended First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and senior SPLM officials. The special court at Freedom Hall resumed its proceedings today morning after being adjourned on Monday by presiding Judge James Alala Deng. The session is being held behind closed doors as prosecutors continue to present evidence and witness testimonies against Dr. Machar and 7 other political and military leaders of the SPLM-IO. The charges relate to the March 2025 attacks in Nasir County of Upper Nile State. According to the prosecution, Dr. Machar and his associates orchestrated a premeditated assault carried out by the White Army. The attack targeted a government military garrison and resulted in the death of dozens of soldiers and civilians. During today's hearing, the lead investigator presented statements from 4 of the accused. Following this, the prosecution requested an adjournment, explaining that the investigator was too fatigued to continue after delivering the witness statements. While the defense opposed the request, the judge granted the adjournment to ensure a fair and thorough trial. Lead prosecutor Joe Hissa had earlier asserted that the evidence clearly links the accused to the planning and execution of the Nasir attack. The defense has rejected these claims and continued to argue for the innocence of the accused. President Salva Kiir this morning convened a high-level consultative meeting with leaders of the economic cluster to discuss the country's economic challenges and preparations for the forthcoming International Monetary Fund and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. According to a statement from the Office of the President, key economic leaders attending the meeting include Vice President and Chairperson of the Economic Cluster, Dr. Benjamin Bolmel, Minister of Finance, Atian Ding Athian, and the Governor of the Bank of South Sudan, Dr. Adisa Baba Otho. The statement said the meeting focused on preparations for the IMF and World Bank annual meetings, where South Sudan will seek support for its ongoing fiscal and monetary reforms. The leadership reaffirmed its commitment to implementing sound economic policies, enhancing national resilience against economic shocks, and presenting a unified strategy for effective engagement with international financial institutions. The engagement reflects the government's determination to restore economic stability, build investor confidence, and foster sustainable growth for the benefit of all South Sudanese. The Transitional National Legislative Assembly has passed a motion calling for the development of a national cemetery management policy in South Sudan. The motion was tabled by lawmaker Nyayang Johnson Locke, who raised concerns about the lack of proper burial sites in Juba. She said that only one functioning public cemetery remains along Yei Road, while several old graveyards in Gumbo, Jubanabari, New Side, High Malakal, and Konyo Konyo have either been abandoned or illegally turned into residential areas. Log explained that the situation has been worsened by rapid urban growth, the absence of a legal framework, and weak protection of burial grounds. She argued that unregulated burials, land grabbing, and the loss of heritage cemeteries undermine the dignity of the deceased and also pose public health risks. According to lawmakers, the motion calls for a national policy framework to secure new land for cemeteries, regulate burials in line with cultural and religious values, and safeguard existing sites. It also recommends a nationwide audit of cemeteries, the creation of a cemetery registrar, and the establishment of a special cemetery for martyrs and organized forces. MPs pointed to Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda as examples of countries that have adopted clear policies to manage public cemeteries. They said adopting a National Cemetery Act will help protect cultural identity, promote public health, and ensure dignity in burial practices for future generations. After deliberation, the Assembly passed the motion with all its recommendations and observations. This is iRadio News. Delegates at the Cattle Migration Conference have agreed on 10 resolutions aimed at regulating cattle grazing and addressing conflicts between herders and farmers following a two-day meeting in Juba. The conference, which began on Monday, brought together delegates representing different counties in Central Equatorial State to discuss issues related to cattle migration and ways to prevent related conflicts. According to a document seen by iRadio, the resolutions include a call for the implementation of the Coda resolutions agreed in August, which enforce the presidential order to return all cattle that are not originally from the state. Other resolutions focus on continuing public awareness campaigns to promote peaceful coexistence and developing policies on cattle migration statewide, among others. Speaking at the closing of the conference yesterday, Governor Rabi Mujung Emmanuel urged delegates to disseminate and implement the resolutions to ensure peace and stability in the state.
Gathering was never meant to end as mere talk show. Its true measure will be judged by how faithful we will collectively implement the 10 resolutions that I've seen you have signed as the stakeholders. Implementation is the bridge between vision and reality. Unless we translate these commitments into actions at the community, county, and state levels, the sacrifices made here will not be in vain. I therefore urge every stakeholder to carry these resolutions back to your constituencies, to integrate them into your work, and also to champion them among your people.
Governor Mujung also urged participants to view cattle herders and farmers not as enemies but as partners in development. He reaffirmed his government's commitment to establishing a body to oversee the implementation of the 10 signed resolutions.
The state government is fully committed to ensuring follow-up. We shall strengthen coordination with security forces and ensure that there is an establishment to oversee the implementation of these resolutions, ensuring accountability and consistency. Let us remember, cattle herders and farmers are not enemies. They are partners in development. Our duty is to create systems where both livelihood coexist peacefully, where food security is guaranteed, and where no child grows up in fear of violence.
The conference, held for the third time, was organized by the State Ministry of Peacebuilding and the Community Empowerment for Progress organization with support from the International Organization of Migration, IOM, and other partners. This is our radio news. Authorities in Akoka County of Upper Nile State say torrential floods have submerged homes, leaving residents in dire conditions after being forced to leave their homes. Andrew Monchol, the county executive director, says hundreds of people have sought shelter on higher grounds in the bushes to escape the flooding. Monchol appealed to the national and state governments as well as aid organizations to provide urgent assistance to those affected. He was speaking to the state-run SSBC yesterday.
أنا بنقول للحكومة كان يساعد شعب بتاعكم طبعا ما في material ممكن يساعد المنطقة out there they might be saying people are evacuated from their out to the bush until they will go. So this report I request to the state government to look how is community facing the flood in the country. So this report the government state rescue and tell the NGOs to come and find out the flood what has been Akoka County.
Severe flooding has also been reported in other parts of the country, including the Greater Pibor Administrative Area and Panjshir County in Unity State. The National Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation has issued warnings about rising water levels in rivers across the country, including the Nile and Sobat, where the risk of flooding continues to grow. Before the international news, the governor of Warab State says the National Minister of Agriculture has pledged to provide tractors, farm tools and other equipment to boost agricultural production in the state. Governor Bolwek Agoth made the remarks after meeting Hussein Abdelbagi Akol, the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security in Juba yesterday. In a statement published by his office, Agoth commended the ministry for providing 15,000 seedlings planted across the state during the recent tree planting campaign. He said his administration is working to transform small-scale farming into large-scale agricultural development, stating that the state has vast arable land, reliable water resources, and a youth population eager to engage in farming. On her part, Deputy Minister of Agriculture Lily Albino reaffirmed the ministry's commitment to implementing President Kiir's directive to expand agriculture nationwide and enhance food security. She announced plans to establish agro-mechanical centers in Warab State to service farm machinery such as tractors and providing agricultural extension training to farmers. Albino also said a delegation from the ministry, together with representatives of key development partners, including the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, will visit Warab State to identify priority areas of cooperation. The leaders further agreed on long-term strategies to strengthen agricultural development in the state. This is iRadio News. And now we move to the international news with my colleague Madrama James, brought to you by Prestige Millers Company Limited.
South African opposition politician Julius Malema has been found guilty of discharging a firearm in public 7 years ago, an offense which carries a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison. In 2018, a video emerged showing the economic freedom fighters leader firing several shots in the air during his party's 5th anniversary celebrations held in the country's Eastern Cape province. He was judged alongside his former bodyguard Adrian Simine, who was acquitted. Malema was convicted of hate speech less than 2 months ago and often lashes out at the white minority in a country where 31 years after apartheid ended, racial tensions still run high. Elsewhere, a Nigerian man deported from the US to Ghana has told the BBC that he is now stuck in a hotel in Togo after he and 5 others were secretly transferred to the neighboring country by Ghanaian officers. The man said they were informed they would be moved from a military camp to better accommodation but were then dumped in Togo. The U.S. government deported the Nigerian man along with other West African nationals as part of its crackdown on immigration. Ghana's Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto previously said the government had accepted the deportees in the spirit of Pan-African empathy. And finally, at least 69 people have been killed and dozens injured after a powerful 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck the central Philippines late on Tuesday. The province of Cebu, which suffered the brunt of the damage, declared a state of calamity early on Wednesday after thousands spent the night on the street amidst repeated aftershocks. One Cebu resident told the BBC he was among them, adding that power and water supplies were cut off. He says that the voices of crying children could be heard around him, adding that they were traumatized. The earthquake comes barely more than a week after the country was hit by back-to-back typhoons which killed more than a dozen people.
Thanks, Madrama James. Up next is sports news with Darlington Moses.
Thank you so much, Lasuba Memo. Starting with home news, South Sudan Football Federation has appointed Mr. Malwal Deng as its new competitions manager, succeeding Mr. Henry Paul. Malwal brings extensive experience, having served as assistant competitions manager for youth, a member of the South Sudan Football Federation Competitions Committee, matched commissioner, and general coordinator. He currently works as a FIFA stadium data collector and was recently involved in the South Sudan vs DR Congo match during the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers. In UEFA Champions League, here are some great league stage highlights. Harry Kane continued his sensational form, scoring twice as Bayern Munich dominated Pafos in a convincing victory, while Antoine Griezmann netted his 200th goal for Atletico Madrid, helping his side secure their first Champions League win of the season by thrashing Eintracht Frankfurt. And Lautaro Martinez bagged a brace as Inter Milan eased past Slavia Prague in a comfortable win. Meanwhile, Jose Mourinho's return to Stamford Bridge ended in disappointment as an own goal by Richard Rios handed Chelsea a narrow victory over his new club Benfica. And finally, Olympic silver medalist Laura Muir says she has put a difficult chapter firmly behind her following the 3 years ban of her former coach Andrew Young for serious misconduct. A UK athletics disciplinary panel found that Young, whom Moore stopped working with in 2023, engaged in manipulative and coercive behavior and repeatedly ignored medical advice. One disturbing incident involved Young driving at speed with athletic after a disagreement and abandoning them at the roadside, endangering their safety. Other misconduct included forcing an athlete to compete against physiotherapist advice, threatening exclusions from training or races for non-compliance, emotionally undermining athletes who voice concerns about injuries. This is all in the world of sport, and back to you, Lasuba Memo.
Sounds of the week on iRadio.
Thanks, Darlington Moses, with the very latest in the world of sports. This is iRadio News, and to end this bulletin, here's a recap of the headlines. The court session today has been adjourned to Friday following a request by the prosecution citing the fatigue of the lead investigator after presenting witness statements in the Nasir incident case against suspended First Vice President Dr. Riek Machar and senior SPLMIO officials. President Salva Kiir this morning convened a high-level consultative meeting with leaders of the economic cluster to discuss the country's economic challenges and preparations for the forthcoming International Monetary Fund and World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. And the Transitional National Legislative Assembly has passed a motion calling for the development of a national cemetery management policy in South Sudan. Third stand of iRadio Afternoon News. If there's a story or an event you'd like iRadio to cover or report about, please send us a text message at +211 925 287 It's also a WhatsApp number. Follow us on X at iRadio Juba, like our Facebook page iRadio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at iRadio South Sudan. You can also visit our website and listen to us online at www.org. Stay tuned for the news in Arabic at 1:30. And before I thank you, I would like to encourage iRadio listeners and those who had been following us on our Facebook page that we have encountered some technical glitch with our Facebook page, but we have another option for you, that is iRadio Sport. That's where we publish our stories and also other information that you will want to know. So please go to iRadio Sport and get the very latest from South Sudan and beyond.